I have immensely enjoyed the services thus far, and I'm grateful for the invitation to join you here at Grace Cathedral, this beautiful place of worship. And to be honest, I find myself wishing that my father were still alive, for this moment would be especially meaningful to him. As one of 7 children who grew up on a farm deep in rural Alabama, it was the Episcopal Church, specifically St. Mark's, the Black Episcopal Church in Birmingham, that supported my father's desire to attend high school and later college. My father became a lay reader in the Episcopal Church, and I have vivid memories of accompanying him on Sundays to church. Father Perry remained a close family friend until he died. I'm not sure how my parents decided that I would eventually join my mother's church, the Congregational Church, but my father remained a loyal member of the Episcopal Church until his death. And so since I have shared a bit of my biography with you, I should also talk briefly about my other major connection to the Episcopal Church. As a teenager, I spent the last 2 years of high school in New York City, living with the family of an Episcopalian minister for 2 years. As it turns out, Reverend William Howard Mellish and his father, John Howard Mellish, had recently been removed from their positions as rectors of what was then the Trinity Church in Brooklyn Heights, largely because the son was a founder and an active member of the National Council of Soviet-American Friendship. This was one of the many tragic consequences of the McCarthy era, which, I might add parenthetically, appears in some respects to be repeating itself today. My own inclinations toward political activism were confirmed and enhanced as I watched Reverend Mellish's efforts to keep the loyal members of his congregation together, even as they had lost their home, a beautiful Gothic revival structure built in the 19th century. I learned a great deal about faith, about commitment, about perseverance. I also learned about the eternal importance of collective resistance and collective imagining of the future. And these lessons have continued to inspire me throughout my life. I learned a great deal about perseverance in the struggle against racism from the Mellishes. I could spend all of my allotted time this morning speaking about their activism, especially in the struggle against racism. The fact that Reverend Mellish, along with the playwright Arthur Miller, assisted W.E.B. Du Bois to buy a home in Brooklyn Heights in 1951, making him the very first Black person to own or rent property in Brooklyn Heights. Today, almost 3/4 of a century later, it is in many ways remarkable that what we considered some of the most explicit examples of racism are no longer major issues. But I remember what my friend, the poet June Jordan, said when she pointed out that simply integrating did not guarantee Black people the right to the means with which to enjoy that which was integrated. What I find exciting in this moment is that many of us are no longer depending on what now appears to be simplistic solutions based on the logic of diversity. Yes, of course, we want and we need racial and gender and sexual diversity. However, diversity does not guarantee the transformation of the structures that have maintained the problem of racism, the problem of heteropatriarchy all of these years. Over the recent period, we have been able to forge a collective consciousness of racism that emphasizes its structural character rather than the notion that it is an aberration, a defect born either by individuals or by nations with explicit racist policies. Historical change usually happens gradually, often without our being fully aware of it. And then there are moments when the motion of history appears to accelerate. However, at those times, we are often only catching up to where we should have been all along. If someone had told me in 1972 that it would take almost 50 years before widespread recognition of the structural character of racism would occur, I would have vigorously disputed that person's speculation, as intensely as we were organizing among students and faculty, among workers and unions, among church, synagogue, and mosque congregants, among artists, musicians, and other cultural workers. It would surely be no more than a few years or so before we would begin to witness the changes. If someone had said then that it would not be until the summer of 2020 that we would experience in a discernible way the emergence of a collective consciousness regarding the extent to which racism is embedded in the structures of our institutions, and that this consciousness would be sparked by a pandemic, excuse me, by a pandemic, and the recognition that indigenous, Black, Latinx people were suffering most because of the structural racism in our healthcare system, I would have said, come on now. 50 years is a very long time, almost a lifetime. We will certainly see major changes before then. Even though I am talking about the intransigence of racism, or the permanence of racism as legal scholar and critical race theorist, yes, critical race theorist, Derek Bell put it, I do not want to convey the impression that nothing has changed, that we have not progressed at all. Neither do I think that indigenous people, Black and Latinx communities, Asian communities, women, LGBTQ communities, especially trans people of color, neither do I think that they should express public gratitude for the changes that have occurred. If anyone deserves to be thanked, it is certainly not presidents and senators and others who occupy positions of leadership and authority. Rather, those who are responsible for the changes that have occurred are people who have been unrelenting in the struggle for radical social transformation. Oftentimes, those most responsible for change are the ones whose names are not inscribed in the historical record. It is precisely because of the millions of people who remain anonymous to us today, but who had collective visions of a better future. It is precisely because of them that we are here today contemplating the path ahead. Yet, in the third decade of the 21st century, there are still those who believe in the superiority of whiteness and maleness. But they represent the counter forces of history. They represent those who want to move backwards, who want to move in a retrograde direction, who want to live in the past. But more importantly, there are those who are still walking down the freedom trail, recapitulating the freedom work of indigenous people and African and Asian descended people, working class people of all racial backgrounds, women and gender non-conforming people who believe in the inseparability of racial and gender justice, and who believe that as long as freedom is confined to a few, or even to more than a few, as long as we recognize that some human beings deserving of freedom have been left behind, we will all have work to do. People of faith, faith in a divine being, faith in the power of ordinary people to bring change to our world, people who believe that it is possible to save our planet, to safeguard the future. Know that we should learn from the indigenous people who have been the very best human stewards of this earth. We should recognize that in this infinite universe, it is illogical to assume that humans will be forever at the center. False assumptions regarding the anthropocentric character of our world disregard the fact that species other than humans have an equal claim to existence on this planet, and are equally, if not more beautifully and interrelationally necessary. If we are to imagine a world where generations of humans and other living beings, plant and animal alike, will have a future, we will have to resist all the forces that value profit over life, that refuse to recognize the inestimable damage done by white supremacy, by settler colonialism, including in Palestine, where it continues to expand, by borders and police and prisons, and by those who believe that the solution to our problems reside in the past. I hope we will situate ourselves among those who are not afraid to embrace new perspectives, who are not afraid of a trajectory that is not certain, but which certainly will allow us to encounter new ways of continuing the constant quest for justice, peace, and freedom in the world.